Welcome back, McFly subscribers. Today we're tying the CDC Bubble Caddis, which is a super buggy, fairly realistic pattern that doesn't need expensive hackle, yet it still floats really well. Now I will discuss this fly in more detail further in the video, as I'm sure you all want to get started tying right away, but in case you haven't seen this channel before, this is McFly Angler.
Starts now.
Okay, let's start tying. Place the hook securely in your vise. I will be using Risen's Barbless Dry Fly 100 in size 14. This is a standard length dry fly hook with a down eye. You also do want a dry fly hook for this fly, which means that the wire is a bit thinner and it's lighter weight, which will help keep this afloat. A heavy nymph hook could cause this fly to sink. We will also need some thread, and today I'm using Viva's 10-aught in brown. This is a flat thread that is quite fine, yet still has enough strength to cinch down the deer hair. Start your thread a hook eye or two length back from the hook eye and snip or snap off the waist. Then bring your thread down to about the hook point mark. While not necessary, I want to add an egg sac. To do this, you will need some bright green superfine type dubbing, like this Skeeter Fuzz. This stuff will dub on really tight, allowing us to achieve a small round ball. We don't need much, so just pull out a small wisp of dubbing and separate it out in your fingers a bit. Dub this onto your thread in a tight but spread out noodle. And leave a small space of bare thread before the hook shank. Let's start winding this noodle onto the hook, wrapping back the bare thread slightly, ensuring to start the dubbing noodle about at the hook bend. Then create a dubbing ball that is slightly into the hook bend, which will look like a caddis depositing its egg. Now I had too much dubbing, so I'm pulling some off. And as I said, you want very little of this. We don't want this ball to be too big. So end with your thread right in front of the dubbing ball and the start of the hook bend. Now we need some CDC, and today I'm using a gray color. Now this comes in many colors, more than I'm showing here, but this will become the wing, and most caddis wings are either gray or brown. Even olive could work, just make sure it's something darker. So I'm using this gray. The body, however, will be a lighter color, like this orange-brown dubbing, but like I said, the wings are usually darker. Pull out two CDC feathers, and these feathers have a curve to them. So let's align the tips of the feathers and ensure that the curves are going the same way. Then let's stroke down the fibers and pinch halfway up the feather. And stroke back the remaining fibers like so. This will leave us a space, exposing just the feather stem halfway down the feather like so. Place the feather on top of the hook so that the curve is angling up, and then make two wraps over the bare part of the stem, and then pull the feather back so just the tip is tied in. Clean up the hook shank by wrapping over the feather tips, and then bring your thread back down to about the hook point mark. Now for the body dubbing, and for that I'm using this vicuna dubbing, which is made from alpaca fur with other fibers mixed in. You're going to need a bit more of this than the egg ball, so let's pull out about this much, and separate a bit in your fingers. Now you want a dubbing with a mix of fibers in it like this. Other dubbings that could work is a scruffy dubbing, or beaver dubbing. Beaver I think is very good for dry flies. Rabbit hair with some guard hairs in it is also an excellent choice, and that comes in many colors. But whatever dubbing you choose, let's make a fairly tight noodle on the thread, and dubbing like this vicuna could take some extra twists to compact it, as the dubbing is very coarse. Okay, now let's start winding this onto the hook to create a tapered body. Start with a little down by the feather, and then make this tapered so it's fatter up by the hook shank. End at about the 2/3 mark on the hook, leaving some space before the hook eye. Now let's trim up any extra long fibers, as the body needs to be scruffy, but we don't want it too long. When you're happy with the body, then pull the feathers forward, leaving a little loop sticking out of the back. Hold these feathers at that measurement and make a couple wraps to capture them. Now let's look at this loop, and if it's sticking off to one side like mine is, adjust it so it's directly on top like so. Then make a couple tight wraps to lock them in. Trim off the excess feather and clean up the tag end, and end with your thread right in front of the wing. Now we need some elk hair, and this is a natural color swatch. You could also use deer hair for this as well, like this natural color deer. This swatch is a bit lighter, which could help you see the fly better on top of the water, or if you really want to see it, use some bleached hair. Either elk or deer is fine. We will also need a stacker, and I have this small stacker here. You can use a large standard stacker like this. However, we are using a small amount of hair, so I find that the smaller stacker helps gather the fibers better. Let's trim off a small amount of fiber, and some would call this about a quarter pencil size, but I don't really find that helpful. So here's a visual representation of the amount that you need. Pinch the tips of the fibers and pull out the short fibers and underfur. This is such a small amount of hair that I can usually get all the underfur with just my fingers, but use a comb if you wish. Then stick the fiber in your stacker with the tips down and give the stacker a few firm taps on your tying desk. Now the tips are aligned. Measure out this fur so it's sticking slightly past the back of the CDC loop. Then let's trim this hair square at that measurement and tie it in on top of the CDC wing. Make a couple loose wraps and then cinch down tight. Keep holding onto the wing and make wraps through the butt ends to compress them. And make loose wraps at the base of the hair to help keep them from flaring too much. Then I like to flatten out the wing a bit with my thumb and spread out the fibers across the back so it covers the CDC loop. And I'm making a few more loose wraps to lay down the fiber a bit flatter. Now for the horns. For that we're going to use Mallard flanks, and I'm using this medium dun color. These come in a wide range of colors. Here are a few that I would suggest though, and it's a good idea to match the CDC wing color if you can. Separate two fibers and stroke them out sideways, which will align the tips, and then rip them off the stem. These have a curve to them, and we want to tie these in so that the curve is angling up. These horns should be about as long as the fly body, and tied right behind the hook eye with just a small space before the eye. Trim off the waist and tie back to the wing. Now grab a bit more of that body dubbing and make another tight noodle. Now cover the front wraps, forming a bushy head, and it helps to pull back the wing and wrap over it with some light wraps. This will further help to lay that wing down. When you reach the horns, pull back all the dubbing and make a couple wraps in front of the dubbing. Then wrap under the horns with one wrap and whip finish under the horns. This is really scruffy dubbing with some extra long fibers, so I'm pulling out some that are way too long and sticking out forward. Stroke the fibers down as well to make them look like little legs sticking out below, and picking out the dubbing a bit can be beneficial. Now I'm trimming up the top here, although I have a big hole here in the dubbing unfortunately. When you tie this, try to cover the whole head area, and I'm sure that you can do better than me. When trimming, make sure you keep some longer fibers angling down so it looks like little legs. You can readjust the horns, and then cement the whip finish. For that I really like this Solarez Ultra Thin Resin. Paint a little on the whip finish and under the horns. And then when you zap it with your UV light, it cures hard instantly. No need to wait for this to dry. And there we go, the finished CDC bubble caddis. This really does look like an adult caddis depositing an egg, especially when looked at from underneath. While these aren't extremely quick and easy to tie, they really aren't too difficult either, and they come out looking and fishing really good, even if you tie these as bad as I do. If you really want to speed these up, you could tie it without the horns. And to be honest, I'm not sure how important these horns are. However, it's part of the original pattern, so I'm including them here. But without the horns, it's a pretty straightforward fly. CDC underwing, deer hair wing, and dubbing body. Not too hard. In fact, you should be able to fill up a fly box in a couple hours. The other great thing about this fly is that you don't have to use expensive hackle. Most dry flies use hackle to keep it afloat, but this uses CDC and deer hair to achieve the buoyancy. Dry fly hackle can get very expensive, so any dry fly that doesn't use it is a fly that costs way less to tie. If you look at this body profile compared to an adult caddis, you can see the resemblance. In fact, if you're casting this out from a bit of a distance, you might not be able to tell the difference yourself. Okay, well I'm almost done with this month's Caddis Dry Fly series, and this fly box is almost filled up. I started off this series with one of the most popular dry flies ever created, the elk hair caddis. Next I tied the Goddard's caddis, a very high floating fly that is practically unsinkable. Last week I tied up the foam caddis, which is easy and effective. And of course this week I tied up the CDC bubble caddis. Now make sure you check out next week's fly, the Schroer's parachute caddis. Boy, I hope I pronounced that right. It's a very realistic, well-floating, and visible caddis. And if you like fishing parachute flies, this is the caddis for you. So make sure you're subscribed and click that bell notification so you don't miss any future videos like this parachute caddis. By the way, I sell these fly boxes on Amazon with free shipping. They're thin enough to fit in most shirt pockets, or fit multiple boxes in a chest pack so you can organize your boxes by fly type. And the magnetic back compartments are strong as well, meaning the flies won't come out accidentally. See, I can even turn this upside down and shake the box, yet all the flies stay put. And this really helps when it's windy outside, so your dry flies won't go flying down the river when the wind blows. I will link below to my Amazon storefront if you're interested in picking up these boxes. Also, don't forget to check out my sponsor, Risen Fly. They made the hooks I use today, but they also make some of the best fly rods and reels for the money I have ever used. Best off, they're offering you all a discount. So if you're in the market for a new rod or a bunch of hooks or beads, go to www.risenfly.com and type in McFly at checkout, and they'll give you 15% off of your first order with them. Thank you all so much for watching. If you like this video, do me a favor and click the like button. Also, if you could share my videos with all your fishing friends, I would really appreciate it. I will see you on the next video. Now you go catch some fish.